What's up, guys? Happy Thursday. Welcome to episode 26 of The Attachment Confessions. It's your girl Chelsea here, and I'm so excited, as always, to have you here with me today. We've definitely got a good one for you, a hot topic for sure, so settle in and let's get going. And just in case you're an Attachment Confessions newbie, let me fill you in on what the pod is all about. From the moment I discovered attachment science, everything about every relationship I had ever been in finally made sense. And now I'm figuring out what it takes to earn my attachment security and have the best possible relationships from now on. Here on the Attachment Confessions, we'll be diving into all things attachment science while you guys tag along on my attachment healing adventure. My hope is that by bringing attachment science to those of you who have never heard of it before, and by sharing my own story, you'll also be inspired to set out on your own attachment healing journey. As my Confessions fam knows, because I will shout this from the mountaintops until the end of time, attachment is learned. Therefore, an insecure attachment can be unlearned. Healing from your past and earning your attachment security is 100% possible. So, if having the best relationships of your life is your goal, just like it is mine, you're going to fit in perfectly around here. But before we get into things today, I wanted to remind you guys of a couple things. First things first, I just released my free attachment conversation guide for couples, and I want to get it in your hands. Guys, talking about anything remotely vulnerable or serious with our partners is one of the most terrifying things about being an anxious preoccupied, a dismissive avoidant, or a fellow fearful avoidant. If you listened to our last episode, Keisha and Taylor, a real life fearful avoidant, dismissive avoidant couple, courageously joined the pod to give us all a firsthand look at what it's been like for them pushing through things in the most painful attachment dynamic. I provided them with an outline of things to talk through to help prepare them for that episode, and they shared with me how instrumental having that outline was to spark conversation with one another they've never had. So God was like, hey, Chels, you need to make this available to everyone. So I obliged, spiced the outline up big time, and it's now my free gift to any of you looking for a roadmap of how the heck to talk about any and all things attachment related with your partner. Reach out to me on my Instagram at the Attachment Confessions, or if you're not on social media, no big deal. Send me an email at chelsea@theattachmentconfessions.com and I'll get the guides sent your way. And I'll put all that info in the show notes for you guys too. I'm seriously so excited to offer you this free attachment resource guide, and I am so hopeful that it will help you just like it helped Tisha and Taylor. Side note, if you haven't listened to their guest episode yet, holy smokes, you have to go back and check it out. It's been a record-breaking episode, and the feedback on their story has been incredible. If you've ever been caught in the crossfires of a fearful avoidant, dismissive avoidant relationship, that episode will speak volumes to you and make you feel seen, heard, and understood in ways you never knew a podcast episode could. I also want to remind my listeners of the partnership we have with world-renowned attachment expert and relationship coach, Dr. Sarah Hensley. If you're looking to heal your insecure attachment, you're in luck because listeners of the Attachment Confessions get 10% off any of Doc's programs when you use the code Chelsea10 at thelovedoc.com. This is good for any of her digital services, okay? Including her Achieving Your Attachment Security self-paced course, one-on-one coaching, her $59 online workshops, and her highly popular and my personal favorite hybrid group coaching program. Dr. Hensley's stuff is rooted in science and is the real freaking deal. I've taken advantage of several of her programs myself, so if you want to get secure AF like me, again, that code is Chelsea10 at checkout at thelovedoc.com, and I will add a link to the show notes for you guys for that too. Alrighty, are y'all ready to jump into today's topic with me? As you can tell by the title, today's episode revolves around one word: boundaries. Guys, setting boundaries is not just a self help buzzword, okay? And when it comes to attachment, it all depends on which side of the attachment spectrum you land on that determines everything about how you handle this infamous B word. For dismissive avoidance or fearful avoidance that lean more toward their avoidant side, having strong boundaries is their way of maintaining their independence, autonomy, and sense of inner peace and harmony, which, as we all know by now, are the primary needs of our avoidant friends. In total contrast, for anxious preoccupieds and fearful avoidance that lean more toward their anxious side, the inability to set and keep boundaries is deeply wired into their attachment wounds. APs subconsciously fear that boundaries will push people away. FAs subconsciously fear that having boundaries will make them come across as cold or unlovable. Ultimately, though, both end up abandoning themselves as a way to keep the peace and avoid abandonment and betrayal as best as they possibly can control, which, unfortunately, usually backfires in more ways than one. This episode is meant to be a wake up call to my anxiously attached friends because Lord knows I've been boundaryless so many times in past relationships. And after learning about my fearful avoidant attachment and having my eyes open to all the boundaries I should have held but didn't, I refuse to make the same mistakes. And I don't want you to either. So today, we're getting into why this happens and what the heck to do about it. Guys, it's confession time. I cannot tell you how many times I said yes when I wanted to say no, or stayed silent when I should have spoken up, or kept a boundary for like a cool 5 minutes before totally caving. And it's honestly so frustrating because in every other area of my life, I'm like this strong, independent, not easily swayed person. I used to pride myself on being a nonconformist, okay? But when it comes to my romantic relationships, I've been the total opposite. It's that classic fearful avoidant savior complex that's got me dropping my boundaries like it's not hot at all, 9 times out of 10. And I know I'm not alone, which is why I've been really trying to give myself grace in this area. When I look back at times in my past relationships where I should have stuck up for myself more, or let my yes be yes and my no be no, it honestly pisses me off that I crumbled so easily. But it wasn't because I had bad intentions. I just oftentimes wanted to keep the peace. So for that, I need to be more gentle on that girl, the version of myself that was trying my best with the information that I had at the time. A lot of us have spent the better part of our adult lives being absolutely terrible at this thing called boundaries. Not necessarily because we don't know that we need them, but because every time we try to set one, our nervous systems immediately convince us that we're being too much, too difficult, or too likely to push someone away. Sound painfully familiar? Trust me, I feel you. Before we dive any deeper into the attachment piece in all this, let's chat about what boundaries even are, as well as what they're not. Is it just me, or does that word seem to get a bad rap? It really shouldn't, though. I think a lot of us with insecure attachments honestly have a distorted view of what boundaries are, which is part of why we struggle to actually set them. First of all, boundaries are not walls. They're guidelines for how you need to be treated to feel safe and respected. You literally teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. So if you're constantly allowing others to call all the shots, walk all over you, convince you to do things that go against your morals, values, or comfortability levels, then they will continue to treat you that way. Side note, if you're with someone who treats you like that, please hear me when I say you are worth so much more than that. And it's time to reconsider that relationship ASAP. Okay, next up. Boundaries are not punishment or rejection. They're an act of self respect and they're a hallmark of a healthy relationship. Trust me when I say this. People who matter won't leave you for having boundaries. They'll respect you, and your worth isn't tied to how good you are at people pleasing. That one's for my APs in the back. Next, healthy boundaries are not selfish. They're actually what makes a relationship sustainable long term. When we self abandon and set fire to our own boundaries, that actually builds resentment. And eventually, all that resentment that's been compounding will come to a head. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And that's not fair for you or your partner. Lastly, a boundary is not the same thing as an ultimatum. This might be where the perceived bad rap comes in because a lot of us get these two concepts intertwined. So, here's the difference. A boundary is something we set to protect ourselves, it's for us. An ultimatum is a coercive demand, a tactic that's used to pressure someone to change, usually accompanied by a threat. People get these confused, but there is a subtle but massively meaningful difference. For example, an ultimatum is if you don't do this thing I want you to do, then here are the consequences. I'm going to leave you, whatever the consequence might be. But a boundary is hey, I'm not comfortable with XYZ. I can't control if you decide to continue doing that thing or not. I don't want to control you. That's not my place. But for my own peace or my own safety, if you choose to continue doing XYZ, then you're communicating to me through your actions that you no longer want to be in relationship with me. As my guy, Dr. John Deloney, famously says, behavior is a language. Their lack of respect and consideration for your boundaries shows you everything you need to know about whether they truly value you and the relationship. I wish so badly I knew this wisdom in my previous relationships, but hey, you live, you learn. So, what's the science behind the lack of boundaries for those that struggle with an anxious attachment? Let's talk about our anxious preoccupieds first. For our APs, boundary setting feels foreign and terrifying. These feelings are rooted in their core fear of abandonment and constant need for reassurance. Because their primary goal is to never be left, setting a boundary is like lighting a match near their relationship. It's way too risky to even attempt most of the time. Like we've discussed in previous episodes, anxious preoccupieds are wired to fawn, appease, and people please instead of protect their own needs. They would rather self abandon than potentially experience the threat of their partner piecing out. They are notorious for falling into the infamous codependency trap, where keeping their partner happy becomes more important than keeping their own sense of self worth. That's because their worth is totally tied up in their relationship. Remember, an anxious preoccupied attachment style forms in childhood due to experiencing intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes their needs were met, other times they weren't, and for no particular rhyme or reason. Because they experienced inconsistent responsiveness to their needs, this conditions them to believe their needs are quote unquote too much. The intermittent reinforcement teaches them to associate their natural desires with unpredictability, which then leads to anxiety, followed by eventual rejection. In the rare instance that an AP does attempt to set a boundary, the boundary doesn't hold for very long. Their nervous system perceives the impending conflict and distance as a direct threat to their survival. When they try to set a boundary with their partner and get any sense their partner isn't pleased about it, they'll panic, back down, and go into a fawn response, aka major apology mode. That boundary that's put on the back burner in order to quickly restore connection with their partner comes at a high price, though. Over time, the self betrayal leads to unexpressed anger, resulting in bricks of simmering resentment that gradually stack up toward their partner. Now, for my fellow fearful avoidants, we have a unique and often contradictory relationship with boundaries. Remember, we're the complex attachment style that combines the core needs and wounds of both the anxious preoccupied and the dismissive avoidant, just depending on the situation. We desperately need boundaries, which reflects our avoidant side, but are terrified of what enforcing them will cost us, which reflects our anxious side. Let's talk about the FA's core wound, the fear of betrayal. For us fearfuls, it's not a matter of if our partner is going to disappoint or hurt us, whether it be big or small, it's a matter of when. And when we put up a boundary, it feels like we're just bracing for the inevitable betrayal of that boundary to take place. Us FAs are kind of like a walking emotional contradiction in the way that we desperately crave closeness while simultaneously pushing our partners away. This same contradiction shows up in boundary setting, and quite frankly, boundaries can feel like a double edged sword for us fearfuls. When we lean into our avoidance side, our boundaries can be too tight. For us, it's a survival mechanism. But for our partner, holding way too firm can make them feel excluded or unloved. On the other hand, when we're leaning into our anxious side and holding our boundaries way too loosely, much like the AP, we can begin to resent our partner as our core need of being seen, heard, and understood isn't being met. But it's not being met by our partners because we are ignoring our own need of being seen, heard, and understood by not holding firm on our boundaries. Since we swing back and forth between avoidant and anxious, our boundaries can either come across as too harsh or virtually non existent. What ultimately happens for us is we have inconsistent boundaries where we set them firmly in one instance, then backslide when feeling overwhelmed the next. This pattern of inconsistency is highly confusing for our partners and, quite frankly, feels equally confusing for the FA internally as well. And let's not forget the hypervigilance factor of the fearful avoidant. As a means of self preservation, we're constantly scanning for whether a boundary we set will be respected or weaponized. We're always on guard, so you don't want to cross us fearfuls by disrespecting or trying to misuse our boundaries against us. We will cut you, figuratively speaking, of course. Well, for me at least. As a fearful avoidant, you guys, my boundaries were all over the freaking place. Sometimes I'd go completely silent and shut down, avoidant mode. Other times, I'd convince myself the boundary wasn't worth the fight and just let things slide, anxious mode. Either way, though, I was never actually advocating for myself. I was just reacting. Looking back on my past relationships, my longest relationship in particular, I will say I landed more on the anxious side of my fearful avoidant attachment in terms of setting and keeping boundaries. I was guilt tripped at every turn if I had an opinion or a need or a desire that was contradictory to what he wanted me to do. And these were very basic needs and desires, like bare minimum. I totally felt held hostage in my own life and usually just gave up anytime I had a boundary he crossed because I was quite honestly too emotionally, mentally, and physically exhausted to bother to hold it, which became almost a daily thing, if not for sure weekly. I wonder so often if I would have gotten out of that highly toxic and emotionally abusive relationship sooner, had I known about attachment and boundaries and gaslighting and manipulation and covert narcissism and lots of other awful things I experienced throughout the course of that relationship. When I dwell on it too much, it absolutely baffles me how I put up with it for as long as I did. But the most important thing that I have to consistently remind myself of is that I got out eventually by the grace of God. He opened my eyes to the boundaries that person crossed over and over and over again and gave me the courage and peace I needed to finally get out. In fact, we're coming up on my personal Independence Day in just a few days. 3 years free of that absolute madness that was freaking wrecking my life, sanity, peace, and future. God is so good, y'all. I will say, I set and held boundaries better in my next relationship after that one, though. Was I perfect? Absolutely not. But was it an improvement that I'm proud of? Absolutely. Baby steps, you guys, baby steps. So, how the heck do us fearful avoidants and anxious preoccupieds actually start setting boundaries in our relationships? Lucky for us, there are practical action steps that we can begin to put into practice. Is it going to feel like you're lighting yourself on fire at first? Probably. But just like anything else in life, the more you do it, the better you get at it. You're not expected to make a 180-degree shift overnight, and I'm certainly not advising you to go in guns blazing on boundaries, okay? But Let's chat through some specific, totally doable tools to start building and maintaining boundaries without totally blowing up your relationships or your nervous system. First things first, you need to know the difference between a boundary and a wall. One protects the relationship, the other closes it off entirely. I'm talking more to my dismissive avoidant friends with that one, but this is always good to keep in mind for my anxious peeps too. Step two, you need to identify your boundary triggers. Take some time to reflect and think about the situations that consistently leave you feeling resentful, drained, and disrespected, okay? Those are your signals, and those are the areas you need to work on creating boundaries around. I can think back to a list that would probably be at least a mile long from that former relationship that I mentioned. And those are the boundaries that I will be damn sure won't be crossed ever again. Like stuff that y'all would be appalled to hear if I said them out loud. Step three, regulate your nervous system before having a boundaries conversation. What this ultimately means is you need to make sure you're in a calm, collected state when bringing up these matters. In the heat of an argument, bad idea. When both parties are emotionally elevated, you may as well be speaking your needs to a brick wall. Boundaries set from a triggered state rarely land well. And by rarely, I'm confident in saying pretty much never. Step four, start small, okay? Like I said earlier, no need to go setting fire to all your relationships. I mean, some of you may very well have relationships that need to be strongly reconsidered for sure. But you don't have to overhaul every relationship all at once. Your nervous system needs to get accustomed to doing something it's pretty much never done before. So, baby steps are a totally acceptable approach. This is exposure therapy, which is gradually facing the things you typically would avoid out of fear so that your nervous system can learn through repeated exposure. Hey, I didn't die just because that was scary or unfamiliar or uncomfortable. And over time, you get better at the thing. Step five, and this one is really important. Be sure to use I statements, not accusations or ultimatums. I need X in order to feel safe lands very differently than you always do Y. And for the final step, the most crucial element to all of this, the follow through. This is the part that trips up us fearful avoidants and anxious preoccupieds the most by far. But remember, you guys, a boundary you don't keep teaches people it's negotiable. Consistency is everything when it comes to holding firm on your boundaries. This is the area that I've taken so many L's in. And because my boundaries so often crumbled, it literally eroded my overall sense of self and quality of life. I almost became a total shell of myself by the time I finally snapped out of it and did what I should have done so many times before, which was stand up for myself, my needs, my desires, my future, my sanity, and refuse to continue in a relationship that was totally sucking the life out of me. Repeat after me. We do not set ourselves on fire in order to keep others warm. We do not sell ourselves out in order to get into someone else's good graces. And we surround ourselves with only those who truly love, understand, and respect us. Those are some mantras I've learned from Peaceful Barb. If you don't know who that is, look her up on Instagram. She's freaking amazing. Okay, I want to land the plane with one closing truth statement. Boundaries are an act of love for yourself and for the people in your life. Boundaries don't push the right people away. They filter out the ones who were only comfortable when you had none. As my girl Cody Sanchez says, you must learn to be disliked or you'll find yourself stuck in a prison of other people's beliefs. And just FYI, guys, our securely attached friends set boundaries naturally, which means learning to do it is part of earning your attachment security. Ultimately, you can't pour from an empty cup. Protecting your energy is what makes you capable of actually showing up fully for the people you love. Setting boundaries used to feel like the most selfish thing I could do. Yes, a huge piece of that is because I'm a fearful avoidant. But being in a toxic relationship where I was made to feel like the worst person in the world for voicing my boundaries also reinforced that selfish narrative that I subconsciously felt about them. Now that I'm 3 years out of that prison of a relationship, I've learned that setting boundaries and sticking to them is the most loving thing for me and the people I care about. I deserved to have a relationship where my needs mattered. I obviously still deserve that. And you do too. The only way to get there, though, is to start believing that yourself. All right, guys, that does it for today. If today's topic reminded you of anyone in your life who could stand to set and keep some boundaries, please do them a favor and share this episode with them. And speaking of having better boundaries, I'm so excited to tell you about our next episode. Attachment expert Bev Middleman will be joining us for a crucial conversation about how hookup culture is absolutely destroying our attachments, so you will not want to miss it. It might ruffle some feathers, but it's time to call the cultural elephant out in the room. Bev will be helping me kick off our brand new summer guest series in a big way, and I can't wait for you guys to hear her science backed thoughts on this particular subject matter. Our summer guest series is going to be freaking epic, y'all. Until then, go set some overdue, much needed boundaries, and I'll see you back here on the Attachment Confessions in a couple weeks. Love you guys. Bye.